Good morning, dear children. Let's continue with the next part of the lesson. Previous week, we have already started the lesson collectors. So it was clear, children, who are collectors here? The aliens are collectors. What happened till now? We'll recapitulate. Some 6 students and 3 teachers got stranded in a deserted area. They were on an adventure. They came for outing, but suddenly it started raining. So as it started raining heavily, the children got worried and the teachers got worried. They wanted to take shelter as soon as possible. Then later they find a house, they take shelter there, and they wanted to just confirm whether the owners will agree or not. They wanted to take permission from them. So lastly, Mr. Hunt agrees to take permission. All the children insist him to go and take permission from the owner. So they were getting wet. They wanted to go and stay in a safe place as soon as possible. When Mr. Hunt comes and takes permission from Mr. and Mrs. Brown, what happens next? This is the scene. In the first scene, what happened? It was a lonely countryside. Children and teachers, they were on an adventure. They got stranded in a deserted area. It started raining and they came to take shelter in the house. Okay, now the next scene starts here. Inside the kitchen of the house, Mrs. Brown is standing with all the children and teachers. Mr. Brown comes in through the outer door. You can see here the 2 lines in the starting of this paragraph. They tells us that Mr. Hunt was successful to get the permission of these 2 people, Mr. and Mrs. Brown. They are the owner of this house. So they agreed to take the children and the teachers to give shelter to children and teachers. So all the children and teachers are standing in the kitchen of the house, inside the kitchen. The scene starts here. Okay, the children and teachers, they are standing. With whom they are standing, children? With Mrs. Brown. They are standing, a lady. Then Mr. Brown comes from other door, from outer door. Mr. Brown, I have hung up all the wet clothing in the porch. Mr. Hunt, I don't know why I am still holding this walking stick. Mr. Brown, give it to me. I will put it outside with the other things. Mr. Hunt, it's all right. I will hang it on the back of this chair. Mrs. Brown, now that we have all introduced ourselves, why don't you children sit down? Mr. Brown, and the grown-ups can come through into the sitting room. Mrs. Brown, you children will be all right here, won't you? There isn't room enough there for everyone. You can see here, children, where children and teachers, Mrs. and Mr. Brown are standing in the kitchen. They are having conversation among them. They are conversing and they are talking. What they are talking? Mr. Brown said that he had hung up all the wet cloths in the corridor. Then Mr. Hunt was very thankful for him and he was holding a walking stick in his hand. Mr. Hunt was not getting a place to hang it. So he tells to Mr. Brown that still he is having a walking stick in his hand. Then after seeing a stick in the hand of Mr. Hunt, Mr. Brown says, he asks him to give it to him so that he will hang it to he will hang that stick with the other things. Then Mr. Hunt he tells that he will hang up that stick back of this chair. Then afterwards, Mrs. Brown tells that as we have all introduced ourselves, she asked the children to sit comfortable, and she asked the grown ups means the teachers, to come and sit in other room, children. That means only in the kitchen children will be remaining. So Mrs. Brown wanted the children to stay in the kitchen, whereas she wanted the teachers to take in other room. So what happens here now? After the conversation, the children will remain in the kitchen, only the teachers will follow Mr. and Mrs. Brown to the other room. Why? Because there was not so much space. So they wanted to make the children to feel comfortable. They wanted to give much space for them. Okay, let's see what happens. Carol: yes, thanks. Glenn: oh yes. Pete: we will be fine. Mrs. Jones: thank you very much for taking us in like this. Mr. Brown: our pleasure. Mrs. Brown: there is a fresh pot of tea made in the other room. Would you like a cup? Miss Swan: I would love one. Mrs. Jones: so would I. Mrs. Brown: would you like to come through then? See, as soon as Mrs. Brown gives a suggestion to join the teachers in the other room, here we can see Carol, Glenn, Pete, they conveyed thanks to Mrs. Brown. Even Mrs. Jones was also very happy to listen this, because they wanted to take rest, children. We can see here how they are conveying thanks to Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Actually, it was a kind of help they were in need of. They were in need of that kind of help. So they have to convey thanks. It is quite natural. So Mrs. Brown said that there is a fresh pot of tea. If anyone likes to have it, you can join. Again, she asked them. So here we can see Mrs. Jones said, Miss Swan said she likes to have it. Mrs. Jones also joined her. Then all the teachers with Mr. and Mrs. Brown, they went to other room. Mr. and Mrs. Brown and three teachers go out. The children are silent for a moment or two, looking around. So when the elders left the room, only children were left behind in the kitchen. Everywhere was silent. The children also stood silent for a moment. They started to have a look around in the kitchen. And what they noticed, the children? They are speaking here now. Wayne: you can't hear any sound of that wind in here? Tracy: no, it's terribly quiet, weird. Dawn: I can just hear their voices in the sitting room. Glenn: it's cold in here too. Wayne: maybe we feel cold because we are tired from all that walking. So what they are talking here, children? Wayne was getting strange that he could not understand, he could not hear any sound of the wind. It was soundless in the kitchen. Whereas Tracy, she also said, it looks very weird. It looks like frightening atmosphere. Then Dawn, he said, just he too agrees with Wayne and Tracy. He says that I can hear only the voice of those elders, those who are sitting in the other room. Then Glenn noticed that it was very cold there. Wayne said the cold is because of their tiredness. Let's see what happens, children. Tracy: and we did get wet. Glenn: no, not just that, it is cold. Pete: and empty. This kitchen reminds me of a hospital. Where do they wash up? Dawn: in the sink. Tracy: or the washing up machine. Pete: there is nothing like that. Carol: there is nothing standing about either. No plates, no pots and pans. Things like that. Dawn: they will put away in cupboards. You can see, children, how the children who are standing in the kitchen are getting curious. They wanted to know why the kitchen is empty. When they observed, they had a glance in the kitchen, they found that there were no pots, there were no pans, even the sink was empty, and they were wondering where Mr. and Mrs. Brown washed their hands. The kitchen was totally empty. And Pete here he is telling that it reminds him the atmosphere of hospital. These are strange children. Then we can see here Don he is telling that maybe they have put all the things in the cupboard. There is nothing to get strange about the emptiness of the kitchen. We can see here while they are conversing among themselves, they are getting curious to know why the kitchen is empty, and on the other side some children are convincing each other why the kitchen is empty. Maybe they have kept all the things in the cupboard so it is not visible, so the kitchen is appearing empty. Wayne opens a cupboard near the back door. Wayne, this one is quite empty. Don't go poking about, Wayne. See, Wayne wanted to find out why the kitchen is empty, so he went near to the cupboard and he opened it. But for a strange thing, what happened? Even the cupboard was empty. Then Don warned him not to poke inside. He was peeping inside. Pete opens the fridge door. Pete, there is nothing at all in this fridge and the light's not on. It's not even working. See, what is the another strange thing, children? The first strange thing was kitchen was empty. The another strange thing was cupboard was empty. And when Pete opened the fridge, even the fridge was also empty. The fridge was not working at all. There was no light in it. Why this is all empty, children? Can you guess? So in the beginning of the lesson itself I have told Mr. and Mrs. Brown, they will join later. And you can guess, children, who they are. And in the beginning of the paragraph, Mr. Hunt had told that the house, last summer he had been there and the house was not there. Within a year the house had come. Very strange thing happening here. Let's see what happens, children. Tracy, leave things alone, you too. It's cheeky to snoop. Besides, they might come in and catch you. Carol, I thought there was something a bit strange about Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Pete, funny you should say that. So did I. Glenn, perhaps they are crooks. This is their hideout. Tracy, they would hardly have let us in if they were crooks, would they? Dawn, no, that's silly. See, Tracy is insisting them not to touch any of the things. She is warning the other children, warning her friends. But still, Pete, Glenn, they were so curious. And the things which they noticed are discussing among themselves. They noticed the funny thing of Mr. and Mrs. Brown. And what they are comparing that funny thing? They are comparing that funny thing that Mr. and Mrs. Brown are appearing like thieves. They are thieves so because they are stealing the things and they are hiding here. It is their hideout place. It means they are robbers. They are giving a title to them, children. It is a funny thing actually. They are assuming like that. But it is not true. Mr. and Mrs. Brown are not robbers. They are not crooks. Crooks means thieves. And what Glenn is saying that it is the hideout place for them. It is a hiding place for them. Here other children are feeling like it is a funny thing. It is a silly thing they are talking about. They are not appearing like that. Just it's an assumption, children, going on here among them. Carol, maybe we ought to have gone on walking to the village. Dawn, we would have got drenched. Now, after noticing all these strange things, they are regretting that why they came here. They could have gone walking to the village. If they had gone to the village, they could have gone so much wet, isn't it? They could have got difficulty while walking also in the rain. Mrs. Brown comes back into the room. Mrs. Brown, all right here, good. When children were busy among themselves conversing, Mrs. Brown enters the kitchen, and she asks the children, is it all right here? She notices the partly open cupboard door. Oh, were you looking for something in that cupboard? Don, it was Wayne. He was being nosy. Mrs. Brown, I see. See, when she came to inquire whether the children are comfortable or not, she noticed that the cupboard door was open. It was partly open. So she inquired the children, who has opened the cupboard? Then Don, he got scared and he said that it was Wayne. He wanted to open the cupboard and he saw what is there in the cupboard. Then Mrs. Brown said, yes, okay, I see. She was not happy. She was not happy that children have opened the cupboard. She closes the door looking at Wayne. See, Mrs. Brown was not happy that children have opened the door of the cupboard. She not wanted children to know their reality. Wayne, I didn't mean any harm. We just wondered where you put your plates and things. See, when she looked angrily at Wayne, Wayne started to convince her. Convinced by saying that he didn't mean to harm her, just he wanted to know what is there in the cupboard. He was curious whether there are the plates kept in the cupboard or not. Mrs. Brown, I would rather you didn't touch anything. You have just moved in and haven't had time to sort things out. That's why this place looks rather deserted. So what answer Mrs. Brown gave here? She said that you are new to this place. And as you have come just now a few minutes back, then why you are becoming so curious about the thing? Make yourself comfortable. Spend some time. Then later you can have a look in the kitchen and you can roam around and you can look in the house. It's a deserted place, she said. No one is living, only that house is there. And what they would expect, isn't it? Pete, we only wondered. Mrs. Brown, yes, well, would you all like a drink? Tracy, I would. Glenn, me too. Mrs. Brown, will orange juice be all right? Wayne, yes, please. Don, fine, thanks. See, when Mrs. Brown was not getting convinced, Pete started to convince her. He said, we only wondered why the kitchen was empty. Then Mrs. Brown closed the topic and she jumped to other topic. She asked the children whether they want to have a drink or not. Tracy said that she wanted. Even Glenn agreed with her. He too wanted to have a drink. Then Mrs. Brown said she would prepare orange juice for them. Wayne and Don, they said yes, it will be a good idea. The others nod. Mrs. Brown, good. And remember, please leave these cupboards alone. Wayne, we will. Pete, don't worry. Mrs. Brown. See, when Mrs. Brown said she will bring juice, all the children, they nodded their head. Then while leaving the room, she warned the children not to touch any of the thing, not to leave the cupboards alone, means not to open the cupboards. She said, she warned them. Indirectly, she warned them. She said to leave the cupboards alone. Then the children agreed that they will not do the mistake again. That mistake to open the cupboard. Then Mrs. Brown got convinced and she said, this is the answer. She looks at the closed doors of a larger cupboard on the opposite wall. Do remember that? I will go and get those drinks. Carol, did you see her hand? Dawn, no, what? She looks, while leaving the room, children, she looks at the larger cupboard. There was another cupboard. That cupboard door was little larger. It was in the opposite wall. And again she warns all the children before leaving the room. Do remember that. Do not touch any of the things here. When she was going, Carol noticed something. And what was that something, children? She noticed her hand. Carol, when she closed that cupboard door, I looked. She has 7 fingers on both hands. See, What she noticed? She noticed that Mrs. Brown was having 7 fingers in each hand. Tracy, horrid. Pete, I was watching her eyes. Glenn, as yes, as far as I could see, they were all one color. They didn't have any black sort of centers. Wayne, go on. She could be something weird like a vampire. Tracy, oh, shut up. Dawn, yes, shut up. You are making all this up to scare us. See what the children noticed here. They noticed that Mrs. Brown was having 7 fingers in her hands, and also they noticed a strange thing about her eyes. She was not having a black center in the eye. Later, Wayne, Tracy, and Dawn they started to get scared. They started to make the other children to sit quiet. But it is the true fact, children. What they noticed was true. It was the strange thing because normal human beings will be having 5 fingers. Sometimes we notice that one or the other person will be having 6 fingers in the hands, but 7 fingers, it's a strange thing. And the black center means normal human beings will be having a black dot in the eye, but she was not having like that. It's a scary thing, children. Pete, no, we are not. Tracy, I don't want to stay here. Wayne, I will tell you something. The train has changed into thick fog outside. I have been watching it. So Pete said, no, we are not making you to get scared. Tracy said, I don't want to. She was getting so frightened that she don't want to stay there. Wayne said, the rain which had started before it has turned up into a thick fog outside. Glenn, yes, you can't see anything out of that window. Carol, no, I hope it doesn't mean we are going to have to stay here all night. Tracy, stay here all night? Not me. See, it's a horrible thing for them to believe the lady is having 7 fingers and the eyes are very strange. They not wanted to stay for a moment in that house. They wanted to leave that house as soon as possible. So they are telling that all night staying there, it is impossible for them. I don't fancy that either. Let's go. Glenn, we can't just slide off. Pete, I will go and tell Mr. Hunt and others how we feel. He goes out. It is all a bit mysterious. I wonder what's in that other cupboard. Dawn, leave it alone. See, children not only they wanted to leave the house alone, they wanted to take their teachers with them. So here Pete said, I will go and tell to Mr. Hunt that what the strange things we observed here. Then he goes out. When Pete leaves the room, when again he gets mysterious, again he gets curious. He wonders what are there in the cupboard. He wanted to open the cupboard doors and see. Then Dawn warned him again not to disturb those cupboards. Tracy, if she catches you, she will be mad. Wayne, she won't catch me. He opens the cupboard door. Behind it are dials, digital readouts, colored lights, and a mass of other electronic equipment. Tracy, see, when Wayne was curious, when Wayne was wondering to open the door, Tracy warned her not to open it. Wayne was so confirmed that Mrs. Brown won't catch him. Then he goes and opens the door, the bigger one, the door of the bigger cupboard. As soon as he opens the cupboard, what he notices, children? He notices that behind the door there were electronic boards. There were dials, digital buttons were there. It was a big kind of machine. The machine was there behind the door in that cupboard. It was an electronic equipment. Where we find that electronic equipment, children? We find to operate the machine. Means the machine is operated through that electronic equipment. There were lights, colored lights, mass of colored wires. It was very strange thing for the children to believe. So have you got an idea now? What is that house, children? It is not a house. It is, what it is, children? Yes, it is a spaceship. It is a UFO. And who operates that UFO? It is operated by aliens. And who are the aliens here? Mr. and Mrs. Brown are the aliens. What happens to children and the teachers? We will study in the next class. Your homework is to read out the lesson once. If you have any doubt, you can ask me in WhatsApp. Meet you in the next session. Thank you.